Coenzyme A is a very, very common molecule inside of the body, and it is involved in many, many different biochemical processes. The main way you would have heard of coenzyme A is through acetyl coenzyme A. Now, the way that coenzyme A specifically works as a coenzyme is if you have an enzyme that's trying to break down something such as acetyl or build up something such as acetyl, the acetyl will first have to bind to the coenzyme to activate it, and then the coenzyme will fit into the enzyme's active site, and then from that point it can add things onto the acetyl group, which will mean that it can turn to different molecules, etc. And then it'll be released from the coenzyme and do a whole load of other things. But despite coenzyme A being a pretty big molecule, if you look at the images up on screen, it has many different functional groups. It has things like sulfur in it, so many different chemicals. It is actually surprisingly simple to make and only takes 5 enzymatic steps inside of the process in whichever parts of the body it's needed to actually make it. It's probably something that's made in every single cell of your body, just like things such as cholesterol, which does show you just how important it is. Now, the first molecule that is the starter molecule for coenzyme A is a molecule known as pantothenate. Now, pantothenate is also known as vitamin B5, but I will get to that in a little bit. So the first step is pantothenate is added to an ATP. This will turn into 4-phosphopantothenate as well as an ADP. This reaction is catalyzed by the enzyme pantothenate kinase. As I said, vitamin B5, the B vitamins as a class of chemicals are known as energy-producing vitamins. This is because things like vitamin B6, it's involved in loads of different enzymatic reactions, and it can help the enzyme be able to actually break down molecules. Pantothenate is a very good energy-producing molecule. It's in this category because it's needed to produce coenzyme A, which is a coenzyme just like other B vitamins such as biotin, riboflavin, etc., etc. And without something like coenzyme A, you don't get acetyl-CoA, and therefore you don't get anything like the Krebs cycle, which is one of the main ways your body is actually able to produce certain high-energy molecules such as ATP, NADH, which can then go on to produce ATP, which is the cell's universal energy currency. Now, the second step is you take that 4-phosphopantothenate, you add it to a cysteine. This will turn into 4-phospho-N-pantothenate cysteine. This reaction is catalyzed by the enzyme 4-phosphopantothenate cysteine synthetase. Now, if you look at a molecule of cysteine and you look at the end of a coenzyme A molecule, they're actually very similar, and that's because cysteine is sort of the end bit of coenzyme A. The sulfur group is the bit that molecules such as acetyl are actually able to bind to, and that is how something such as coenzyme A is actually able to work. This reaction also allows ATP hydrolysis to occur, whereby the third phosphate group inside of ATP is able to break into ADP and an inorganic phosphate. This is a hydrolysis reaction, so water is also used up in this process, but this is good because ATP breaking down into these two molecules is a good way for your body to produce energy, because that third phosphate bond is has such a high energy when it breaks. That is how your body uses energy. That ATP is the body's universal energy currency, and so that is essentially how, like muscle contraction, every single thing that happens in your body that takes up energy, that is what ATP is used for. Then the third step is you take that 4-phosphopantothenate cysteine and you convert it into 4-phosphopantothene. This reaction is catalyzed by the enzyme PPC, I'm just going to abbreviate it from now on, decarboxylase. Now, the fourth step in this reaction, and things will start to look like coenzyme A after this step, you take that 4-phosphopantothene, you add it to an AMP, which stands for adenosine monophosphate. This will turn into dephosphorylated coenzyme A. This reaction is catalyzed by the enzyme phosphopantothene adenylyl transferase. Now, the reason that you need the AMP is because you already had the phosphorylated pantothene, but then you've got the sort of double phosphate inside of the coenzyme A. So you have one which is contributed by the AMP as well, but there's still one more step which just adds the phosphate group onto the bottom of the coenzyme molecule. And that occurs when you add D-phosphocoenzyme A to ATP. This will turn into straight up coenzyme A after only 5 steps, as well as an ADP molecule. And despite the fact this video has been incredibly short, it's such a big molecule, yet it only takes 5 reaction steps. That's one very interesting thing, because when I first looked at a molecule of coenzyme A, when I was first doing some kind of research for, I think it was my first proper science video on cholesterol, off this point in time, I remember doing loads and loads of research, and just loads of ideas about things I could talk about for science just came into my head at one point in time. It was like I was just writing ideas down, brainstorming. One of them was coenzyme A formation, and I thought this was going to be something that would take like half a page, because it's a bigger molecule than cholesterol, right? Cholesterol has something like 50, maybe more odd steps inside of its like metabolic synthesis. Yet coenzyme A being probably 2 times, 3 times maybe the molecular weight, for instance, only takes 5 steps because it's made up of like individual molecules that are commonly found inside of the body, but are just like slightly smaller than coenzyme A itself. I never noticed the section which contains the pantothenate on coenzyme A when I first sort of did my research, even though I kind of knew what that molecule looked like. I never noticed the cysteine end. I never noticed that would be involved in this kind of thing. So that's just a very, very interesting thing that I found out. But yeah, as I said, coenzyme A, it's such a useful molecule. That's why things like protein, things like vitamin B5, and so many other B vitamins and general vitamins themselves are so important, because without coenzyme A, you don't get acetyl coenzyme A, and henceforth you don't get the Krebs cycle, and henceforth you don't get 3 NADH, 1 FADH2, 1 ATP being produced inside that cycle, as well as the multiple ATP that something such as NADH itself would produce. So yeah, that's just another thing. And the way that this sort of process is regulated, so you don't actually have too much of a buildup of CoA inside of the body, is coenzyme A itself, it competes with the enzyme pantothenate kinase so that you don't have too much of that enzyme and the process like happens too often and stuff. So yeah, that's how this process is regulated, just how cholesterol synthesis is regulated in one step with like HMG, CoA, something like that. But yeah, the whole yield in total of this reaction, if you sort of came up with a generic reaction for the whole 5-step enzymatic process, you end up with coenzyme A, 3 ADP, 1 inorganic phosphate, and yeah, that's it. You end up adding 3 ATP, 1 AMP, pantothenate, and a cysteine. I'm probably ended up missing something in that, but I'm pretty sure that's all that sort of happened. That's all that was added in that, and that's all that came out of this reaction. Sometimes it's nice to certain people to picture things in that specific way. But with that, that's all I wanted to talk about, and I recommend subscribing because I like this community of young tribal people who are willing to improve themselves so much more than they already have, and good luck.